and welcome in to a postseason episode of Heat of the Moment. And by postseason, I do not mean the playoffs. I mean the season is over. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend Lino. And today will be our first, technically, off-season episode of Heat of the Moment. Since our last episode, the Miami Heat suffered a really rough loss, a sweep at the hands of the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll talk about that a little bit up top. And then the rest of the episode, we'll be giving out grades for the season, which will be fun to talk about. Well, essentially, it'll function as kind of a season recap, talk about the different years, different players, coaches, front office members had, and kind of, how we evaluate it and what we might expect going forward. But like I said, to start, we should at least recap how the season ended. It was a 4-0 sweep at the hands of the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was the largest margin of victory for a playoff series in NBA history. Lino, do you have takeaways from that series? Do you have thoughts you're allowed to share on public airwaves?
Yeah, I think that overall, my takeaway is that this was a necessary trauma for us to go through as a team and as an organization. My one concern was that we were going to scrap our way to 2 or 3 wins, which for this front office could be just enough to verify that we should, run it back and see what happens. But I think a total devastating and historical sweep by the 1 seed should paint a very clear picture of the deficits on this team for the front office. And that is my silver lining. And I'm sorry that the guys had to go through that and that we as fans had to experience to experience something that really we already knew to be true, that this team is not enough. This roster does not have enough to get over the hump in any capacity, whether that hump be just making it into the playoffs without having to go to the play-in tournament or making it out of a round, but definitely not making the finals or winning a championship with this roster. It's just not that caliber of a roster, no matter how much I love a lot of the guys on this team. So that was my main takeaway as the series went on and things got worse. It was mostly that good. Things should get worse because this team did not even break 500 on the season. So there's no reason they should be able to beat 1 seed. And so, yeah, I was not having a good time watching these games, but I go into this off season with some peace of mind, knowing that I'm not crazy and that, this team isn't just magically going to be better. So I'm really hopeful for some changes down the line, which I do think are coming. And I'm excited to talk more about not only the guys that have been here, but, what we might expect in the future.
Yeah, that's all well said and lines up with what I have in my notes as well. Essentially, the first bullet point I have is my only real takeaway from this series is how far away the Heat are. The Heat have essentially functioned through the play in a different means as the 8th seed for 3 straight seasons now. And the 8th seed in the East, even though, as we all know, technically they were the 10th this year and 7th other years, it is very far away from contending. And that's what we're seeing here. And the problem with being far away from contending in the NBA is it's not always linear progress. It's not like, okay, we'll make a few moves and then we'll be the 6th seed and a few more moves and then maybe we're conference finals contender. It can sometimes be that you need to bottom out before you can get back on top. We've seen that, with the Houston Rockets. They had James Harden, struggled against Steph Curry, tore it all down, built it all the way back up to the 2nd seed, and then lost to Steph Curry again. So the life cycle of an NBA team can go through a lot of different phases. And, this offseason will be very interesting to see how the Heat decide to proceed and who they decide to proceed with. Of course, we'll cover all that for you guys. And we'll get into in future episodes kind of what our expectations are for the offseason, what the Heat can do this offseason, and maybe like some players we want to target or hopefully acquire. But again, this episode is mostly going to be focused on this past season, the 2025 season. And so Lino and I are putting on our scholarly hats. We're going to be grade teachers. We're going to be reading over our rubric and deciding if anyone passed or failed. My rubric, our rubrics will be a little different. So if I give someone an A and Lino gives them a B, we might still feel similarly. What I went off of was my expectations for them coming into this season. If they performed about at expectation, that was like a C for me. That's kind of like what I expected. And then from there, well over, it's like an A. They're really disappointing, a D or an F. That was kind of my vibe. Lino, what was your grading rubric for all these guys we're going to be evaluating?
Yeah, it's pretty similar, except I'd say that if someone met expectations, especially given how the season went, I probably put them around the B plus to A margin, and then like an A plus for exceeding expectations. But I also allow for to be very far off of meeting expectations can go pretty far down into the Fs. And so while I think the average, grade may be a little different between us. I think I definitely do not shy away from getting a bit extreme on the spectrum there.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like Lino would have a better rate my professor rating than I would. So keep that in mind if you're looking to take a
Yeah,
class
getting a
with
C
either
for
one of
meeting
us.
expectations would have me fuming, by the way. If I was in your class, I did what you want me to do. Why am I
That's
walking out of
fair.
here
I don't know
with
why
a 2.0 GPA?
in my mind, I don't know why I feel like a C is average and like meeting expectations feels like average, but you'll see I'd say the majority of my grades are like C minuses, C pluses. It probably wasn't the best way to go about it, but our discussion I think will be enlightening on how we feel about different people. And with the Heat, I feel like the only place to start is at the very top of the organization, and that is with Pat Riley. I'm using Pat Riley to kind of encompass the front office as well. So we'll talk about Pat, some specific things, but overall, just front office moves. And for myself, I evaluated Pat basically starting after Game 4 against Boston last season, or yeah, I guess Game 5, no, because he actually won one last year. But anyway, when the last game ended was when I started evaluating Pat. So to take people through that journey, so he starts that with the exit interview, the postseason press conference where he calls out Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero. That specific part of it got an F for me. Why did you do that? Why wasn't that private? How did that help anybody? Next up, we drafted Khalil Ware and Pella Larson. Good picks. We'll talk about those guys later. So that was like a B plus. Brought back Kevin Love and Thomas Bryant. Why? I love Kevin. Great vibes. Neither of those guys really helped us on the court, so that's not a great thing. And just to go through the other ones quickly, signed Alec Burke to a minimum, very solid. And then, of course, the entirety of the Jimmy Butler saga, not trading him in the offseason, announcing they weren't going to trade him, suspending him multiple times, ultimately trading him, receiving for basically Jimmy in a second round pick, getting back Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, Davion Mitchell in a first. That was obviously what the majority of this grade I think should be based off of, is how he handled that situation specifically. And then you could get into a little bit like the roster itself, how it performed. I mean, that's a reflection of the front office. They're the ones that put the roster actually together. So Lino, with that kind of recap on the board, what is your thoughts and overall grade for Pat Riley?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people in the fan base would probably want this grade to be much lower than I'm about to give him. But ultimately, I give Pat Riley a C minus, maybe a D plus, somewhere in that range on the grade. I think there is obviously a large critique to be made about how the Jimmy Butler situation was handled, but I think certain aspects of the situation were unavoidable. Certain aspects of the situation were probably in our best interests. And ultimately, I think we got a decent package for Jimmy Butler at the end of the day. Things that Pat Riley did not meet expectations on. Obviously, the roster construction was flawed and poorly built, and financially doesn't put us in the best situation. But at the same time, I think there are some bright spots there. Drafting, a lot of people are going to give that credit to Adam Simon, of course, and his draft expertise. But ultimately, that's a guy who's employed by Pat Riley for a reason and is involved in the front office decision making. And I'm sure Pat had a lot to say about where we went with the direction of these draft picks that I was pretty happy with for the most part. Not paying Jimmy Butler, I think, is actually something he should be commended for. Ultimately, I love what Jimmy's been able to do with the Warriors in that role. And I'm glad that they're able to pay them, but they are trying to only win a championship this year, maybe next year, and then they're probably going to blow that all up. That's just not the situation that we're in currently. We don't have the best shooter in the world on our roster, so we can't exactly full send on a 34-year-old guy like that. And it just would have put us in a bad position with a bad roster, stuck in the mud when it comes to financials. So not trading Jimmy or not paying Jimmy is honestly something that he gets commendations from me for, but ultimately the way things went and how poorly the roster is generally constructed really do not meet expectations for me, and that's why he gets a C minus. But overall, I don't think it is as awful as some people feel towards Pat Riley. And those emotions I think are valid, but ultimately I think what we could actually do, what was available to us, and what was in the best interest of the franchise, I think Pat did close enough to as good as he could. And of course, he could have done way better, but I don't think he did as awfully as people may expect, or as awfully as some other GMs probably would have done, caving to certain pressures. But, where did you have Pat Riley in your grade for him?
Yeah, I had a C minus as well. So we're lined up on this one. And for a lot of the same reasons. Some good things happened, right? So Alec Burke signing is good. And again, this is encompassing the entire front office, not just Pat, but Alec Burke signing is good. Khalil Ware, Pella Larson. I mean, I think for Khalil, other than like Jared McCain, who was just one spot after him, I don't think there's anybody I'd want that was picked after him. And a lot of guys picked before him, I'd still prefer to have Ware over. So that pick looks good. Larson produced for a second round pick. And then the Jimmy situation, and like I said, that's the most important thing that happened this season. It is really hard to evaluate because of how many unknowns there are that are involved there, right? So, like, I think
Mhm.
the ideal Jimmy situation is you moved him the off season before this season and you got whatever, hopefully a similar return, if not a better return. You don't have, essentially the first half of the season blown up because of all the suspensions and the we won't trade him, we'll trade him. That created a lot of issues. But again, the unknown is we don't know what offers were available for Jimmy this summer. I think there's been reporting that the Knicks checked in to see, before they made the Mikal Bridges trade. That doesn't mean 5 first round picks were available for Jimmy. It might have been a pretty poor offer. It might have just been Julius Randle, and then it's like, well, Heat fans would have been livid about that too. So it is tough to work with so many unknowns. But based off what we do know, I think Pat Riley handled the Jimmy situation poorly because, one, calling him out in a press conference when you knew it
Mhm.
was already going to be a fragile season with this whole extension looming over all of it. You knew he wanted a max. You knew you weren't going to give him a max. So calling him out there. And you can say, like, oh, it made sense for Jimmy to, just be a perfect citizen and play as hard as he could to earn his next contract. We all know who Jimmy Butler is. It's not like
Got to
shocking
know your
that.
personnel.
Exactly. It's not shocking that things unfolded this way with Jimmy Butler. So I take points off for that for him because you got to know the guy that your franchise player, how he operates. And so then ultimately I come to, how efficiently do you put out the fire that you at least in some part started, right? Like you put
Mhm.
yourself in a bad situation. How'd you get yourself out of it? How do you land the plane that you forgot to put fuel in, or whatever analogy you want to use? And I think they did pretty well, right? Like
Mhm.
Davion Mitchell being awesome really helps, and we'll talk about him later. Retaining him this offseason, I feel like is an important part of this, weirdly enough, because if you don't keep him, then that's just kind of a nothing. The 20th pick is not like the ideal outcome for this draft pick, so that's kind of tough. But ultimately, Andrew Wiggins is a good player on a fair contract, and Kyle Anderson is a solid role player on a fair contract as well. So all in all, slightly disappointing. C minus, felt right. Again, this isn't really factoring in like the Terry Rozier trade. Obviously, that would have brought stuff down, but that was the season before. But yeah, to me, is a little disappointing. But again, this is the Heat have a very high standard already. They're regarded as one of the best front offices. So while this was a very rough season for the Heat, it would be a pretty good season for a lot of front offices. So that's why I landed on that grade.
Yeah, and anybody who would want to be more critical of Pat Riley, I'm all for it. Like, I think there's definitely room to be much more angrier at him for this stuff. I think I always felt like this was a possibility for us, that this is kind of how the season was going to go, just given, certain worst case scenarios. And so when we got here, I just feel less emotional about it. And so moving forward, I still trust Pat to do something. And I think the things he's tried to do were worthwhile. Like, some people would give the Terry Rozier trade itself, a bad grade, but ultimately I thought it was the right thing to do. And I think any GM probably would have done the same thing, not knowing that Terry was going to have the next 2 seasons that he had. So even in that, I still think Pat makes some competent moves that make sense for this team. I just don't know if personality wise he's still fit to lead this organization and the culture of this organization as times change and things of that nature. And, there's probably a greater conversation to be had this summer about what heat culture is, how it's operating right now, and if it's worthwhile clinging on to moving into the future with a new identity. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think we're on the same page with Pat at least.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Like you said, I can definitely feel some listeners being like a C minus for Pat Riley is total charity. But again, I hope we at least highlighted some of the things they did well. Obviously, some things were their fault. But to me, it probably was the most interesting grade to think out. Like I said, I
Mhm.
listed pretty much every transaction, gave them all individual grades, and then, I didn't use any formulas to figure out the total, but just kind of off feel felt like a C minus was fair. But yeah, it was a crazy season. I mean, we'll probably keep coming back to that as we discuss all these guys, but just going back through everything that happened, like, wow, what a year. But
Yeah.
we'll keep going on. Other than Pat, the person that was tasked with handling this very bizarre year more than anyone was probably Eric Spolstra, who will move to next, the Heat's head coach. Spo, like I said, my grades are based off of standards. Spo has, for me, one of the highest standards in the league. I think he's the best coach in the league. I don't think it's very much of an argument. He's not top five, if not top three. So Spo is elite. But this season was disappointing. The roster wasn't great, but still, if your team underperforms, you're going to look at the coach. You're going to be probably disappointed with how the coach handled things. Lino, what were your thoughts on Spolstra this season, and what would your grade be for him?
Yeah, I think that precursor, that Spo's standard is pretty high when it comes to expectations, is very important to put out there, because ultimately I probably give Spolstra an F for this season.
Whoa.
Yeah, I think compared to what Spo has been able to do with much less in previous seasons, with two players ultimately in their prime, I thought it was very disappointing. I think certain aspects really dropped the grade, mostly in the fact that this roster just didn't really accomplish anything. So the highlights of what he did this season really didn't result in much good. Like, the best of his work resulted in a 37-win team and a 4-game sweep in the playoffs, and so there's just not really a lot to bring the grade up. Whereas there's a lot that kind of brings the grade down. A few things that come to mind. Ultimately, I don't think this team maximized what they could do defensively. And a team that was going to struggle offensively one way or the other without Jimmy Butler, I feel like this is probably one of our worst defenses we put on the floor in a while, even though the roster did technically get younger and a little bit more athletic. And obviously, so many things with the big trade that happened and the new players. Like, I want to give more grace for that, but there was things before that that just, I don't think Spo did as good as he could have. The two big things are, one, I think at this point in time, with hindsight, not starting Khalil Ware sooner was a big injustice, not only to Khalil Ware himself, but also to the team. Ultimately, Khalil Ware turned out to be one of the better rookies from this rookie class. And even looking at how he was in the playoffs and maybe some of the underperformance there, and we'll get into his performance in full throughout the back half of the season, I couldn't help but think what we could have gotten out of Ware had he had 40 more games under his belt. Just because he got into the season so late as far as getting real meaningful minutes. And by then he became a very important part of our offense and our defense, probably with a need for more time to get used to that. And who knows what that could have done for the playoffs? Maybe nothing. Maybe he still kind of shows up and does the same thing. But those minutes we know are precious. And this first season for a rookie is very important. And we really didn't gain anything by not playing him. Like we weren't winning a ton of games or anything of that nature. So that was one thing. And then ultimately playing Terry Rozier minutes way too long into the season, giving him much longer of a leash than he probably deserved or earned at that point. And while I don't have any kind of personal vendettas against Terry Rozier, it just became a point where it was too much for too long. And those two things, I think, probably lost us at least 10 to 15 games this season. And ultimately, we probably could have been a 500 team. And that's a pretty low bar for Spo. To not be able to meet that, I do think deserves a pretty critical grade for one of the best coaches in the league to have a 37-win team with two All-Stars effectively on the team, Depoy candidate and Olympian gold medalist, as well as Tyler Hero having the best season of his career to this point. Spo's done much more with way, way less than that in my eyes. And so he gets probably the worst grade I could give him because I can't really see him having a worse season than this. And so that's kind of where I'm at with him. But, where did you land with Spo this season?
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I went C minus with Spo as well, but I don't really disagree with any of your statements. And like you said, like with the Khalil Ware thing, it's some of it similar to the Jimmy thing. It's like we didn't see him early in the season. He might have been an absolute disaster. We
Yeah.
can't know, but he ended up playing well. Stuff like that, though, I almost put more is feather in Spo's cap with Khalil Ware and Pella Larson developing well, playing well. To me, that is something you credit the coaching staff with, especially for rookies, just coming into the NBA. So that was a plus I had for Spo. This defense was the per clean of the glass with the ninth best defense in the NBA. I think that's pretty good considering Khalil. When he's on the court, the defense isn't that bad, but it's not because of him. I think he struggled pretty mightily defensively against any kind of decent team. Hero obviously isn't a great defender. Alec Burks and Duncan Robinson were starting a lot of the year. So again, Davion, Wiggins, those guys helped, but to me there wasn't a consistently a top 10 defense on this roster. So I felt like that maybe was a slight overperformance. The offense was bad. The offense was bottom 10 again, and has been pretty below average for most of these last, I think, 5 of the last 6 years. It's been
Mhm.
below average, and the part of that I feel like I can be most critical about Spo on is he tried to change it, right? Like early in the season, we're talking about we're running this new offense. It's alienating Jimmy and Bam. I remember we talked early on about, man, they're just having Jimmy and Bam stand in the corner a lot while Tyler and Terry are attacking these different angles. And again,
Mhm.
like you alluded to, Terry, too long of a rope. I get
Yeah.
like, for Spo, I feel like once the trust is gone, it's completely gone, which we saw. Like we didn't see Terry again really, but it was too long. Like there's I feel like there's no way to question that. Like he gave Terry too
Mhm.
much rope. And like you said, sad what happened to Terry, but the facts are the facts. Similar to another player we'll touch on later, Jaime Jaquez probably was given too much time. Those were two, like when you look at on off, those were the two worst guys on the team that played any kind of significant minutes. And those guys probably got too much time. And, like you said, there's a lot of intangibles to this, how he handled this Jimmy situation. Like, that was not easy, but the team, fought through. They made the playoffs. Like, there were some successes within this. So that's another one of those where, like, I guess he handled that well, but then he tried to start Haywood over Jimmy, which that like made Jimmy mad. Was that intentional to try and get Jimmy suspended again? Like there's this is such a weird season to evaluate. There's
Yeah.
so much weird off the court stuff that we know such a small percentage of anyway that it's very hard. But yeah, just going pure on court, the offense was disappointing. He did empower Ware and Larson to play well. He set up Tyler to have the best season of his career. He still somehow got a top 10 defense, basically just from him and Bam. There wasn't a lot going on, at least for the consistency of the whole year. Handled a bunch of new personnel coming in and out with the trades and everything. But at the end of the day, I think we talked about this on a show. I didn't think it was possible for a Spo team to go under 500, really, like at this point.
Exactly.
Even with injuries, like I just thought it was impossible. And I will say, and this is probably something against Spo as well. The Heat cleaning the glass has a stat called win differential, and it's essentially based on your net rating. What is your expected record compared to what your actual record was? Miami was 29th in win differential, meaning they, based off their point differential, was expected to win 4 more games than they did. Now, that makes them like a 500 team, right? Which is about what they feel like. But usually, SPO teams overperform in that
Hmm.
category. I think for the last 5 years, they've been at least above average in win differential. And so to me, that's another sign that it's like, dang, SPO, like usually you get the most out of this roster. This season, it does not feel like he was able to do that. And a lot of that, and we can decide how much to attribute to SPO, but were the close losses, the clutch
Lots of close
losses.
losses.
I think 14 and 28 in close games and clutch games this year, and then the blown leads. You and I
Yeah.
have talked about those a lot as they were happening. We don't have to put 100% of those on Spo, but it's impossible not to put some of that blame on
Hmm.
Spolstra.
And ultimately, I think we can even point to probably four specific instances in 4 games that Spo may have lost us, just not only from players' performances, but his decision making in the moment in those close games. The first thing that comes to mind is the timeout call when we didn't have any timeouts against the Pistons late. That effectively lost that game for us. You could probably pick 2 or 3 different games where Terry Rozier's in and we're giving up a double-digit deficit, and he did not need to be in there. You can point to there's a game where we are up and we are trying to win, and Bam Adebayo doesn't come back into the game until like the 4-minute mark, and he's been out since the fourth quarter started. And it's just certain things you can't let happen. And in the post game interview, I feel like I remember him talking about, he tried to get him in there at like the 7-minute mark, and there just wasn't any stoppage. At a certain point, you have to intervene in critical games like that. And I felt like Spo's decision making when it came down to the wire this season was about as worse as it gets for Spo. And so like this F for Spo is like probably a C for other coaches. Like other coaches could probably have way worse seasons than this, but Spo is not really supposed to have seasons like this and should probably never have a season as bad as this one. So that is the only reason I give him that critical of a grade, just because I think every other season beyond this one will probably be way better. And it would really, I think, take an act of God for him to perform worse than this on his level. So,
Yeah.
you know, still love Spo, still think he's one of the greatest coaches ever. And even the GOATs have bad seasons. So he was hoping this is the last one we see.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make at the end. We were both disappointed with Spo this season. We'd also both be soul crushed if we got the notification he had been fired or parted ways with the Heat. So if another fan base is listening, we do not take Spo for granted. We're just giving, an objective view. It was disappointing by his amazing standard. He's still an incredible coach, and we're still very grateful to have him coaching our favorite team. But it was certainly a rough year. Now we get to one of the good grades, I would assume, for both of us. We get to move to Tyler Hero, by far the bright spot of this season. Where to begin? So, Tyler Hero, career highs pretty much across the board, right? True shooting percentage, points per game, assists per game, steals per game, games played, maybe the most important one, 77 games played, 10 more than he had ever played before. Advanced analytics, he was looked upon much more favorably this season than ever before. EPM, estimated plus minus, one of the best public advanced stats. He doubled that. He was 1.5 last year. He was 3 this year. Best field goal percentage at the rim season ever. Best mid range season ever. Most threes he's ever taken and made. I mean, he started the season trying to play off ball. He was beautifully mixing on and off ball responsibilities. Then Jimmy Butler was gone, and he's like, "Oh, I'm the number one option. Oh, Asar and Amin Thompson are on me every night. It feels like I'm having to navigate being a full time point guard because Terry Rozier has completely disappeared. We haven't traded for Davion Mitchell yet. There's no other offensive threats on the team. All right, guess I got to get back in my mid range bag." And then he shot Jokic levels from floater range. I mean, he was tasked with so much. I ultimately went with an A. The only reason I did is like I guess if he became a top 10 player, it would have been an A plus. But
Yeah.
that's I mean it's hard to ask for any more from Tyler, and I think we'll talk about going forward how we feel about him. But to me, he ultimately showcased he's ready to be a number two on offense on a very good team. He's not number
Mhm.
one. Cleveland, showed us that, but he is ready to be an elite number two option. The guy we wanted to have, for a younger Jimmy. Now Jimmy really needs to be the number two, but regardless, incredible growth from Tyler. What were your thoughts and what grade did you give Tyler?
Crazy shot at Jimmy Butler, by the way.
That was what?
Jimmy Butler, breaking news, can only be a number two player on a championship team.
No, no,
I
wait,
agree.
wait, wait, wait. Hold on. Hold on.
Syndicate it.
At
Everybody's
this
listening.
stage of his career where we see him thriving as a number two. And I only mean on offense. Jimmy does so much, but anyway, just
No,
in case
I see what's going
in
on
case
here.
one of Jimmy's groupies somehow stumbles across this podcast, let me be clear. Okay,
Fair,
but
fair.
what you got on
Uh,
Tyler?
Yeah, Tyler definitely gets an A from me, and you're right. Really, the only way he could improve, really, the only reason I don't give him an A plus is just because if he were to sustain this, I'd have to be able to find a better grade for him. And so that was the main thing is, if this is a flash in the pan, which I don't think it is, I think this really, after 82 games, I just think that this is who Tyler is in his prime. And so I was really impressed with what he was able to do. Every game, I was like, is he going to be able to keep this up? This is like a lot of volume and a lot of efficiency and a lot of tough scoring and a lot of shot making. Is he just going to be able to keep doing this? And he really showed that, yeah, this is just what he's going to do on an average night. And you can get some amazing things on an incredible night from him. Defensively, Tyler is who he is on the defense, and we don't really need him to be much better defensively. We need the team around him to be much better defensively so that he can be protected on the floor, as with most of your primary or secondary scores from your guards. And so I was really, really excited about that. And even just outside of the regular season, him making an all-star team, him winning the 3-point championship, and him just being a foundation for these guys in a really rough season. I think a lot of the guys talked about his leadership, Bam's leadership, stepping into that vacuum with Jimmy gone. I thought that was commendable. I think the way he handled the Jimmy situation with a lot of grace and understanding, as well as just a focus on his guys without, getting too catty is, Tyler's pretty capable of getting some subtweets off and some stories out there on Instagram. And I thought he showed a lot of maturity through really the whole process. And so could not be happier with Tyler's season and was really thankful to be able to watch him play for all the games he played this season. He also played a ton of games this season, was record level of health for him, which I thought was really important for him to be able to show, especially after, the Pat Riley scolding that he got in the exit interviews from last postseason. But overall, Tyler, I just hope if we could even get like 2 or 3 more seasons like this from Tyler, that would be incredible. Like just a window where we could find someone to match with him, find a number one guy to play with him so that we can, just get over the hill. That would be so special.
Yeah, I think that's all really well said. And I will say, like you, I kind of had different thoughts throughout the season and even after the season concluded about like, okay, is this Tyler now? Or are we gonna look back on this as like the best Tyler season of his career? I think if you look at the season in totality, I feel comfortable that something close to this level is repeatable. How he was pre All-Star break, that, was like another level that, will probably only come in certain stretches of the season. But I feel like the way he changed his shot profile, the different coverages he had to deal with, being a number one, being a number two, I feel comfortable Tyler can sustain something close to this level. So yeah, hats off to him. And I love the word you used there, maturity really came across and even from like preseason interviews. I think he got asked preseason if he would like comfortable being a starter or like would he be comfortable coming off the bench, which sounds crazy now, but at the time he's like, I'm just gonna do whatever the team needs me to do. And before we know, Tyler would be like, no, I need to start. So I've just been incredibly impressed with him. Doesn't mean I won't throw him in the trade machine this summer, but
It's
Very,
true.
very proud to be a Tyler Hero fan. He was awesome this year. That's probably going to conclude most of the good vibes for the rest of the show. We're going to enter some more murky waters here, and that is Bam Adebayo's grade for this season. Another tough one to evaluate. Anyone that followed the Heat closely this season knows Bam started the season, really the first 2 months were horrific from a scoring standpoint and from an efficiency standpoint. And while he did right the ship after that mark, he only righted the ship to like his average standards. So for the totality of the year, it was still below average. It's not like, water found its level. It went way above average to even out. So it was a career low true shooting percentage for him, but there were positives. He incorporated the three a little more. It ended at like 36% from three, and I believe 40% from the corner. So, like, that's encouraging. The defense, I felt like if he was like 100 out of 100 on defense prior to the season, he might have been like a 95 out of 100. Still elite, still first team, but it was a little bit of slippage, I thought. But, Lino, overall, what did you come away like thinking about Bam this season, and what was your grade?
Yeah, I think I felt pretty much the same as you and the things that you mentioned. He was bad on offense and he was not as good as he's been on defense. I do want to chalk up to the fact that this is a guy who had a very short offseason, playing in the Olympics, gold medal, and being involved in the Olympics too. He wasn't like Jason Tatum sitting around handing out waters. He was, playing basketball. um, And while I can understand that, that did lead to a lot of hype. He got a ton of hype from playing in the Olympics and also just a ton of hype from his peers. His fellow Olympians really hyped him up as well. And we thought we were going to get like a Hall of Fame level Bam Adebayo, at least on the offensive side.
I'm so glad you put it out. The PR machine was
Oh
ready
my
to
gosh.
crown him. Like everything that happened to Evan Mobley this year, that the whole NBA universe was ready to do that to Bam, and oh man, he could not have fallen harder on his face out of the gates, and
Yeah.
it was hard to watch. But again, he got better as the season went on. But sorry, I just had to say that.
No, you're right. And so that probably has a lot to do with it. Is in the same vein that supposed expectations are very high. And so when he doesn't meet those expectations, the grade kind of looks funny for a guy of his caliber. The same thing with Bam. I'm probably going to give him a D for this season. I think personally, I think the defense actually fell off much more than, from 100 to 95. I'd probably put it in like the 85th percentile of what I think he's really capable of doing on the defensive end. I don't think he had the level of impact on other offenses by a country mile for what we've seen in previous seasons, especially in a season where we have had some really prolific young defenders show up and we've been able to really see like this may be one of the most contentious like all defensive teams ever. Like defense is back. Like people love seeing defense. We are seeing defensive highlights. Amin Thompson, Dylan Brooks, God dang the whole Houston freaking roster, the OKC roster, like defense is in. Defense is sexy, and it is just hard to compare Bam to that because he didn't really have that kind of same impact every night. And a lot of the impact he does have is stuff that doesn't really show up in game or in highlights or even in the box score. It's a lot of what people aren't doing because Bam's on the floor, which is great. And I'm very thankful for the level of defense that he provides from as far as like just a foundation. But as far as being an impact defender, in the same way that guys like Amin Thompson are, guys like the whoever that guy is who likes to injure people, Lou Dort, the guys like that who like really have a defensive knack and aggression, a highlight defensive demeanor. Bam kind of lacked that this season. Especially compared to Khalil Ware, who was obviously a much worse defender than Bam Adebayo, but has way more highlights on the defensive end and did have a lot of impact on disrupting other offenses and what they were trying to get to that they actually tried to get to. I think that's the main difference is people don't even try to get to those things on Bam, but when what they're trying to do, they're having success and obviously because we keep losing. Whereas the things that they tried to do to Ware because his scouting report just isn't really fleshed out completely throughout the season, he was able to stop and have an impact on. And so defensively, I was less impressed than I have been in previous seasons. Offensively, he truly struggled in ways that I respected. Like, I don't want to give him like an F or anything like that, because I really appreciate the struggles that Bam went through offensively, mostly because he was integrating that 3-point shot. That's something I really wanted him to stick with. He was catching a lot of flack from it throughout the early season because he was missing a bunch and it was kind of mucking up the offense. And we were going through a lot on that side of the ball already, and people just wanted him to stop. But ultimately, I knew the only way, out was through with that kind of situation. Like, you just have to put the shots up at a way that you can maintain your confidence. Because if you just stop, that's going to be in your head next season. Like, you're not just going to be able to pick it back up, because as soon as you start missing again, you're not going to take any more shots. And ultimately, by the end of the season, I thought that he had developed a really confident corner three and, spot up shooting. So I was appreciative of what he went through that. So I don't want to demean him too much there, but he did sacrifice a lot of what he was good at. And so, yeah, not a great season from Bam. Wish we could have got the season that we all really wanted, especially him. I know he wanted to have a much better season, but ultimately, I still love him. I think he's going to have a much better season next season, and hopefully we can, I think a full season possibly with a guy like Davion Mitchell also, to play off of, is going to help Bam be even more effective on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think that's all well said. The Davion point, especially like regarding Houston, Oklahoma City, even Minnesota, those teams, they have almost all good defensive players. So those guys get to, shine in their role, where Bam is more like shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, like trying to
Mhm.
cover for all these guys. So, but you made the point that, yeah, it doesn't show up in highlights. He's more like an elite cornerback, like prime Darrell Revis or something, where it's like, dang, he ended the season with almost no interceptions. And it's like, well, no one threw to him, so it's like you don't get any steals or blocks if guys give up. So, but yeah, Bam, mixed bag for sure. One question I wanted to ask you: I was listening to Zach Lowe recently, and he was saying Heat fans need to accept who Bam is. Bam is awesome. Bam will never be a top 10 or 15 player in the NBA. He's not going to
Yeah.
average 25 to 28 a game. Does this season change your outlook on Bam's potential? Like, do you see him as a finished product at this point? I mean, obviously incremental improvement, sure, but do
Mhm.
you think there's another level he could reach, or do you think we've kind of gotten what we're going to get from him?
No, I think I came to a very similar conclusion as Zach Lowe. Like, I think that what I really discovered in that Cleveland series and through the season at large is that there's no path for Bam to be an elite scorer. And you can't be a top 10 player without being an elite scorer in some capacity. Like, I think every top 10 player, even if their main emphasis was how good they were defensively, you cannot be that without also having offense. Like, I guess the guys that come to mind that were like defense forward and then had really great offense, like Kawhi Leonard, like, there's just not really a prototype for that in the top 10 or top 15. I don't know if anybody comes to mind for you, but even guys like Giannis, like, that guy, obviously he's just running dunk machine, but he's a really elite run and dunk machine.
Yeah,
And
it breaks my heart to say it because these guys have been compared to each other a lot. But I think what we saw Mobley do this year, I mean, I think most people, I mean, a lot of people had Mobley on their MVP ballot, and I think he's going to make
yeah.
first or second team All NBA, which that's top 10 technically. And if
Mhm.
you want to say like, maybe top 15 is a safer place to put Mobley, he did kind of show the roadmap. He was part of an elite defense and still gave you 20 plus on efficient shooting, obviously in a much better system. And I think it's very fair to say if Bam was in a better role, like we've seen in years past. I mean, Bam was essentially the second best player on a finals team. I
Yeah.
think Bam can be maximized more, but I will say him being the driver of championship equity, I do feel like I've seen where that ceiling is now. I think he can be
Mhm.
like the third best player on a title team and the second best player on a finals team, probably. I mean,
Yeah.
we've seen that. But yeah, I don't. I mean, the 3-point shooting, all that stuff, like those can be nice little additions to his game. But I don't think there's another. I don't think there's the Kevin Garnett, Chris Bosh kind of leap coming.
Mm-mm.
Like, okay, let me ask you this.
Mostly because he's just not going to put the shots up to do it. Like he doesn't have the mentality to do it, even if he wanted to. Like he just isn't going to shoot enough, even if he
Well,
could.
yeah, and it's and some of it's capability stuff. Gosh, I kind of hate how this episode's turning out because I
Oh yeah,
love all these guys.
I'm not posting a single clip from this episode. By the way, no one can ever
I
listen to
I don't I
this.
love
I
these
don't even know if we'll
guys.
publish it. We might need to talk about it if we're even going to share this. But
I love Bam. I love Bam. This is too depressing. Anyway, Bam's great. I love Bam of multiple Bam jerseys. And I think he's gonna shoot the three even better next year, and maybe we'll bring in some talent and he'll look better. Gosh, that went to a dark place.
it got tough there. That was a tough
Um,
pool.
sorry, folks, but don't worry. We're did I even say my grade? I gave him a C minus, which is
Okay,
basically
yeah,
almost what I gave everybody. But we're gonna pivot to a much lighter note now. I decided we should give Jimmy Butler a grade for
yeah.
this season.
F, that guy fucking sucks, dude. He didn't give us anything.
So I have two grades for Jimmy Butler. From the Heat perspective, I have an F minus. Uh,
Yeah.
Blew up the season, whether he had his right to do it or not. From a Heat perspective, a lot of the struggles this year could be attributed to how Jimmy Butler handled his extension talk. So F minus. From a Jimmy Butler perspective, A plus, maybe an S plus. That dude gets to play with Steph Curry. He's already made it to the second round of the playoffs, and he got a max extension. He got the 60 million. He got $120 million for the next 2 years. So we don't have to talk about it too much because again, it's kind of depressing. But yeah, Jimmy, from Jimmy's perspective, nailed it.
But is he gonna have a jersey hung in the rafters anywhere by the end of his career?
No, but I don't think he cares. I
He
mean,
doesn't.
he
But
said he does.
I'm gonna remember that he had a chance to be a Heat lifer and he said no.
Yeah,
And he blew
yeah.
up our season in the meanwhile.
Oh my gosh, did he ever?
Oh man.
What came from Jimmy getting moved, and we'll move through these next ones quickly. What came from Jimmy getting moved was we acquired Andrew Wiggins. For me, I went with a C plus for Wiggins. It was tough because he averaged like 19 a game. He looked pretty good, but he missed like half his games he could have played with the Heat with different injuries. That was disappointing. Obviously, the playoffs, no one looked good in the playoffs, so hard to hit him too much for that. But yeah, I mean, he looks solid. He's probably like slightly overpaid for how inconsistent he is on offense. And we talked about it on one show. It's like the 40-point Andrew Wiggins game. Like you never know when it's coming. It's definitely not coming when you need it, but it sure is fun when it shows up.
Yeah. Yeah, fun player. I like Andrew Wiggins a lot. Probably give him like a C plus for the season as well. Like I don't think it's the best version of Andrew that we got. He's obviously dealing with a lot of health stuff that probably implemented or affected the games that he did end up playing, especially there in the postseason. And ultimately, while he was able to, average 20 points a game, we really needed him to average like 25 or 30. And I just don't think he's able to do that consistently. So as far as grading him based on expectation or need, he probably fell a little bit short or maybe just fell right around average there. And ultimately, I like that I'm glad that there's a Andrew Wiggins Heat jersey. Like, I'm glad that he played here at some point in time in his career. Do I really want to see him in a Heat jersey next year? We'll see. But ultimately, I thought defensively he brought a lot to the table, and offensively he was really fun to watch for the most part up until the postseason. Yeah, so C plus for Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, I like having Andrew Wiggins on my team. Like it's
Mhm.
very enjoyable. I'm a fan of it. But yeah, just wish he could have been available a little more. And I wish he was in like a role that made more sense for him. Maybe like a fourth option instead of a third option.
Yeah,
I think. But a full off season with the Heat, a full training camp. If he isn't traded for someone, I think we could see him look even better.
I
Next
agree.
guy, it can be short, but Terry Rozier. It has to be an F or an F minus, like however you want to say it. But no notes on this. Just feel awful for him. Something just went awry. I don't know if it's a neck injury or what it was, but super sad situation. Like you said at the time, I thought the trade was a great idea. Didn't seem like too much to give. He was averaging 20 points a game for Charlotte, having one of his most efficient seasons. Thought it made a lot of sense and just couldn't be more of a disaster. And that stinks for the Heat, stinks for Terry, and hope he can figure it out wherever he plays next.
Yeah, not much more to say about that. Maybe he turns it around. What if he goes from being what a 10-4-2 guy up to like 15-5, like playing 10 minutes a game? Cool.
This
But
is this is for the Heat.
I guess there's a
Oh,
chance we don't get
oh,
this guy moved. It's
oh.
really hard to move a guy on this worst season ever without sending a
Well,
bunch of stuff out.
I
So
agree, but I'm saying if he stays, he does not need to play. Like
yeah.
if he just has to sit as a $20 million expiring contract until the deadline, I get
But if
it.
we're tanking next year,
Well, that we will do an episode. We now own our 2026 pick unprotected, so there is a tank opportunity we will talk about. Next
good.
guy, Duncan Robinson. Solid season from Duncan, 40% from three, got up 10 attempts per 75. No growth really, but I mean he's like 31. What do you know? I don't.
Yeah.
He's a specialist. He was good. I give him a C plus.
Yeah, I probably give him like a C, C minus. I want to give him a harder grade because I think what it's based off of the expectations I have of what we've gotten from Duncan in the past. But at a certain point, I just had to realize like he's just not ever going to be um, consistent enough to be on the floor as much as I thought we needed him to be. And so, but ultimately, when he was on the floor and when they decided to go to him, he shot pretty well. And to suppose credit, I thought he probably did a good job of choosing when and when not to go to Duncan, and that probably won us a lot of games of the 37 games we won. Yeah, this is probably just kind of the end of the rope with Duncan Robinson in a Heat jersey for the most part as far as playing really effective and longer minutes, but I don't think he did worse than what he's asked to do on a night to night
Mhm.
basis.
Yeah, very similar season to last season in terms of the numbers. So that's why
Mhm.
C plus feels about right. Got an A plus coming up, which is fun. Davion Mitchell. Uh, you
Dude,
know, I mean, other than Tyler, the other biggest bright spot of the season, of course, it comes with an ominous feeling because they need to keep Davion Mitchell, and it is not very easy to do that given their salary structure. But yeah, just 45% from three. I think he had like the second best on-off numbers of anyone that played for the Heat this season. Alec Burks being first, by the way, which is hilarious. But yeah, Davion, awesome, 10 out of 10. Hope he stays on the Heat for a long time.
fourth quarter king. So many games we could have won with Davion Mitchell in the first half of the season where we didn't have anybody who could get 10 points in a quarter. And he just could not stop getting 10 points in the
Yeah,
fourth quarter. It's like,
honestly,
you know what? It's the fourth quarter. It's time for me to make 5 buckets. Like,
yeah.
that's just what it is. So shout out to Davion Mitchell, man. I really hope we can keep him. I love the guy. He just makes sense from a culture standpoint, from a roster need standpoint. I just hope we can figure out the money.
Yeah, well said. Khalil Ware, somebody I wish you had a little more time to talk about, but overall, I mean, 15th pick. I think the Heat kind of took him as like a project, and he was able to perform, started playoff games. Obviously, he's a rookie. There were a lot of struggles, but overall, it's hard not to be encouraged by how he looked. He was 60% true shooting. He and Bam on the court together were +6 per 100 possessions with an elite defense. I think there's plenty of things to be excited about. I went B plus with Khalil. I'm very pleased by his season.
Yeah, same. No notes really. Just keep up the great work. In his exit interview, he talked about the main thing he's focusing on this offseason is strength, which I think is a great thing. Getting comfortable in the defense, increasing his time with Bam, and getting that figured out as well. I think he's going to have a great career ahead of him, and he's just going to be one of those really really solid centers in the league moving forward.
Yeah, one guy that the last guy I feel like we're gonna have to talk about, and then we can kind of just pick different guys. Jaime Jaquez, very difficult year for Jaime. I was impressed with his poise going through it. He never like made an issue of not playing or getting benched. He was always very supportive of his teammates and the coaching staff. So very impressed from him from like a personal standpoint. Did have to give him an F just because he pretty much regressed in every way from his rookie season. And it wasn't a sophomore slump. I mean, it was the whole sophomore season was really rough. So similar to Terry, just hope for the Heat or whoever he plays for next, he can kind of figure it out. And Jaime's a smart guy. I feel like
Mhm.
he'll be able to figure out how to contribute. He'll just need to iron out some of the issues he had this year.
Yeah, I probably won't be as harsh to say an F. I still think if Jaime had was playing at the level he was playing at on a better team, it probably wouldn't have even looked that bad. Or like, if things weren't so crazy, Jaime's job got a lot harder with Jimmy leaving for sure. you combine that with the sophomore slump. You combine that with a lower ceiling as well, just coming out of college at an older age. My expectations for him were kind of low going into this, and I did expect a setback. So he didn't perform that as far as an F for me. And I do feel I have a lot more positive outlook on the rest of his career just because he's such a smart player. So yeah, I think he has a path of figuring things out. Shooting is one of those things that I think you really can develop if you really set your mind to it. And they're in an organization with great shooters, and that's I think a key aspect to someone learning how to shoot is being around other shooters. And I think we have a pretty good development team in that regard. So yeah, I'm hoping for him. I think there's some mental blocks he can get over and have a much better season moving forward.
Yeah, well said. All right, I'll let you pick one guy before we get out of here. We'll each do one more. We have like Jovic, Alec Burks, Pella Larson, Haywood, Slow Mo. Which one of those guys do you feel most motivated talking about?
Um, I think for me, I'll go with slow mo. I'm gonna give him a B plus. I was pleasantly surprised for a guy who was not getting minutes on the team that he was playing for. I was surprised at how effective he was when we needed him the most. There were certain games in there where we were really letting go of the rope, and he was just such a really stable force on the team. I think he has a really diverse skill set, which is interesting. And it was really funny when he had great shooting performances too, because it's like, when he's shooting 45% from three, this is a perfect basketball player. That's only going to happen once every 15 games. But I just was pleasantly surprised there. I thought that was probably one guy that I didn't really know because I remember liking Anderson before he got to the Warriors and then he didn't play. And I was like, well, this guy must be washed and now he's got to play for our team. But the skill set's still there. And I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, my last guy, I'll shout out Haywood Highsmith. A solid B from me for this season.
Mhm.
Haywood shot the ball well, basically career high in true shooting percentage, I believe. He was good at the rim. Another solid season from three. Obviously, he's never going to take a ton. He has to be wide open. He still has some record scratch moments on offense, but the defense is still great. He's doing his job as far as taking and making the open threes. Just a solid player that I feel like we have on an awesome contract, and potentially should have maybe moved to a contender like to get some value because he would be even more helpful on an actual good team. But I love Haywood, just ultimate for professional, and just enjoy having him on the team. Always does his job well. So, all right, boys and girls, that was the postseason grade episode. And woo, buddy, I went into it like thinking like, we're not going to be as depressed. We gave ourselves a week after the sweep to talk about the Heat. Turns out that didn't make a difference. It
Oh,
was
still hurts.
still a lot of pain. But of course, we are Heat fans. We are not purely analysts. We love all these guys. We want them to succeed, though we do try and
Mhm.
give an objective perspective on their seasons.
Man.
And it was a disappointing season. It's hard to put it any other way. So I should say thank you guys for listening to our first season of Heat of the Moment. We started just a little bit into this season, so it's almost a full year. We're excited to get into our first off season of Heat of the Moment. Trust us, we love getting in the trade machine. We'll probably have an entire episode dedicated to John Moran and Zion Williamson and Giannis and all these different guys. So a lot of fun off season content headed your way. We appreciate everyone for rocking with us. For myself, Micah, my good friend Lino, we'll see you guys next time, and we're going to talk about how we're going to turn this thing around.
Oh yeah, next season, Heat and 5, baby.